Hello, everybody, and welcome to Touchline Table Talks. I'm Martino Puccio, Matt Santangelo, alongside you guys. A little bit of a rebranding here. We have a new name, so we appreciate everybody that is recurring. So please like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, show all your support because this is going to be a constant. Matt, let's hop right into it. PSG beat Bayern 5-4. This was the match of the year in the Champions League, and there were a lot of them, obviously, involving Barcelona. But this one right now for a Champions League semifinal.
Yeah.
I mean, this was sensational offensive displays, but they kind of made it look too easy. And the problem with it being too easy is that people are jumping to these conclusions and narratives that this was terrible football. And to a degree, I actually do agree with that sentiment because of the lack of defensive awareness, where even for PSG's sake, like, you have to drop back just a little bit if you're gaining that much of a lead. Conceding 4 is inexcusable. 5 by Bayern is almost unrecoverable. It feels like this, to me, was a great game, especially if you're a neutral. I understand the sentiments of it being poor. Did you take away anything from this that leans in the direction of PSG is going to advance or Bayern? Because again, PSG hosted this one, but they head back to Germany with just a 1-goal lead. What are your sentiments going back into this night? Do you think it's going to be like a firepower shootout in leg 2, or is it might be potentially conservative?
Well, to expect nearly 10 goals in another leg is pretty unreasonable. Look, I think if you're a
Maybe.
neutral and if you're a neutral football fan, having watched what PSG and Bayern Munich played out to this past week, then you absolutely loved it, right? It was entertaining. It was free flowing. It was Route One football. It was whoever gets the ball at that moment. There's a good chance they might score. At the very
Right.
minimum, put a chance on target. And as a neutral in that match, as a Milan fan, obviously we're not in the Champions League. I loved it. I thought it was entertaining, and it comes off the back of Milan and Juve in Serie A, which has always been a marquee fixture. But that ended 0-0. It was a snooze fest. So to see what played out with PSG and Bayern was certainly refreshing, and it was nice to see attacking firepower come to the forefront like it did.
Right.
However, I think if you're a PSG fan or Bayern Munich fan in that match, I think those sorts of fixtures and results are only great if you actually are on the winning side. Because what does it say about Bayern? Yes, they have star power. They have 3 potential top 15, top 10, maybe
Ballon d'Or placements here.
Ballon d'Or candidates here. But the fact that you're at this stage of the Champions League and you're bleeding in 4 goals, and every
Right.
single time PSG's in possession and pushing forward, there's a risk that you're going to concede. It says a lot about maybe how fragile Bayern Munich is, and same thing with PSG. So look, we know these teams have the star power. We know they have the names. They have Dembele, you have Harry Kane, you have Olise, you have names all over the place, right? And they entertained. There's no denying that. But I think there needs to be some semblance, in my opinion, of defensive structure that shows balance, because I don't think playing like this for the remainder of either of their Champions League campaigns is sustainable to get them to winning the trophy, in my opinion.
I think PSG has more tactical flexibility than Bayern does. I think Bayern is just one direction, and this matchup itself is not reflective of where the sport is to a degree, right? Like Hansi Flick and Barca, and what we saw in that Newcastle matchup too. Like it is a bit repetitive, and how you could see it going down Atletico Barca, where Barca put themselves in a position where they're exposed constantly. This one was, in my opinion, more about Bayern just being relentless and allowing themselves to be exposed and hoping to score as much as they could. I don't think this was so much about PSG. PSG converted all their chances, and we've seen them in the past be far more balanced than what Bayern brings to the table. So when people are kind of jumping to these narratives, and I get it because we've kind of seen more of these high-scoring matchups. We've seen them in back-to-back semifinals right now, like last year with Inter and Barca. That's one of the greatest legs that we've ever seen. Honestly, both of them were fantastic. This one kind of carries the same sentiment and weight that we've seen. For me, this is about these two actually being that good offensively. I think they're clearly in the conversation, at the very least, of being the 2 best offensive teams in the world. Maybe you could put Barca in there, obviously, too. And Madrid has the talent. But these are how these two play.
Yeah.
And this is what happens when you have that many quality players on the field, because no disrespect to Bundesliga, there isn't a team close to what PSG is or what they're capable of pulling off. And the same kind of applies loosely to the Champions League. I think it would be high scoring matchup if it was Bayern Barca, for example. But this was all about just quality, because how many other teams, Matt, where you line up with the two of them that you see the offensive talent, you're like, oh my God. Like PSG's bringing on Bradley Barcola, who would be a
Yeah.
sensational starter for a lot of teams, whereas he's just like, oh, Cavada or Due, you want a breather or whatever. Like that's the
He's one of the
amount that
names.
these both of these teams have. And my final point with them is that the parallels that they both own the league that they're in and have no peers in it on a consistent basis, you see it here. These are the reflections, because also like Bayern don't get pushed. This is the first time they kind of got punched in the mouth this year that I've seen. So we'll see. They're not good at home in the Champions League. They've been struggling in recent years. So we'll see what happens there. Any other final points? You have a prediction for who moves on?
Well, I think just real quick on both of these teams and kind of them going forward as far as an outlook is concerned, the fact that they are in such cushy positions domestically allows them to go completely wheels up
Yes,
in
great
matches,
point. Great point. Yeah.
right? So that's a luxury that you have as a top club that, seals your domestic fate as early as they do, right? And I think it speaks to obviously the strength of these two teams, right? Because you just touched on it. You're bringing on guys like Barcola, and you almost like look at the strength of these teams. And I say this all the time: the teams that do well in the Champions League, that have dynasties, that win trophies year in and year out, they have not just a great starting 11, they have guys that, like, when he comes on, you're like, oh shoot, I actually forgot that he was available, or he was available for selection, or he's even on their team. You
Mhm.
can't say that about too many teams in Serie A, but when you look at levels like this that we're seeing with these teams in the Champions
Right.
League, again, it speaks to their financial strength and the firepower that they possess. And in the PSG side, who would have really thought that they had Neymar, Kylian Mbappe, and Lionel Messi, and they upgraded, arguably over all three of those players,
I
based on
am.
what we're seeing.
Oh yeah, I get what you're saying. I don't think so. I know what you mean though. As a collective, I mean, I'm not surprised that Luis
As
Campos
far as the
hiring.
free flowing of the football, because everyone looked and says, okay, Neymar, Messi, Mbappe, like they're going to win everything. But there was no balance with those three
Well, yeah,
players.
yeah,
Those are
yeah.
all
I
ball
am.
dominant players.
I am not surprised, because this is what PSG or a team with those resources should be doing in the first place.
Yeah.
Their footprint was so dumb for years, where it was like, let's get whatever we can to get as many fans as possible,
Yeah.
spend the big bucks, instead of like all the talent that they had that went out the door. And it's
Yeah.
well noted how their youth academy was great. They get a director in Campos who knows what he's doing,
Yeah.
winning in that league, acquiring so much talent, being like, okay, we have a ton of resources. We gave all these wages to Messi, Neymar, and obviously Mbappe. Why don't we sprinkle it around? Why don't we get better defenders? Even the defense was kind of their strong suit. What they did with the midfield was a complete revamping, playing into the mold of Luis Enrique. Again, another great hire, their best managerial hire, probably since Ancelotti. I know they had like Tuchel and other managers there, but it was never about, like a system. Enrique, what he's capable of doing, this is one of the best managers of his generation. I don't think he gets enough flowers for it. So we'll kind of leave it there. I think PSG will move on. They're a juggernaut. Then we get the antithesis of whatever that football was. We go over to Arsenal and Atletico. This one basically could have had 3 penalties. I thought the third non-decision penalty call, it was dicey. We've seen that be called a penalty many times before, especially in Serie A. This one was not given there. I'm not too upset about it, also because I'm not an Arsenal supporter. If I was an Arsenal supporter, I would be upset. This one was cagey. I thought Atletico played better at the end of the day in the full 90 minutes. It's a very difficult environment for Arsenal to go into. Good result for them. They head back to the Emirates, but there's just so much pressure on them. And this is the point you made with PSG and Bayern, that Arsenal could lose out on the Champions League final and potentially the Premier League. So there is a lot of just like this negative thought going in from these supporters. And I don't blame them, because they've been burned so many times, very much like Atletico Madrid. Right here was just the best of both worlds. And why I think the sport's so great is that you can have a PSG Bayern match, find it wildly entertaining and good offensive football, and then head back over to this matchup where I still found it to be entertaining and I enjoyed it greatly. Was it the greatest of finishing? Absolutely not. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that. Julian Alvarez, I think, came off injured in this one. Ultimately, Atletico Arsenal is a great KG matchup that gives you a different taste and flavor of what this sport could be. I don't know who's going to advance. Nothing would surprise me. I don't think Atletico is scared of anybody unless it's Real Madrid in the Champions League. I think that they're going to actually get it done, and it's going to be an Atletico PSG Champions League final. What do you think about the potential matchup for the final? And do you see Arsenal actually making it for the first time since 2006 against Barcelona?
I think the burden of trying to get over the hump domestically is going to ultimately do Arsenal in my opinion. I think Atletico Madrid are so battle tested, especially their manager, and the Diego Simeone career that we've seen. They've come very close to winning this trophy, and I think that there's a lot of people with neutral background watching this fixture,
Right.
feel they want to see, like, they're invested in that storyline. Can Diego Simeone and Atletico Madrid get over the hump and win this trophy? Can Antoine Griezmann head off into the sunset? He's going to play for Orlando City. That's all confirmed. And you'll get that trophy, that Champions League trophy, the Mickey Mouse trophy, once and for all, that he's been searching for. And I think that's also a potential legacy-defining trophy for him, right? Because he is one of Atletico Madrid's most storied and successful players of all time. He's won a World Cup. He's won a Euro. The Champions League trophy is the one that he's
He never won a Euro.
with France.
No, they didn't win it. They made it to final. They lost.
Oh yeah. That's right.
Shout out Portugal. Yeah, right.
Shout out.
No, you're good, but they made it to finals.
Yeah.
Your point is right. He's just one of those people that, like, when he transferred to Barca, Atletico ends up winning, and then he moves back, and then they don't end up winning. They fell short, excuse me, and he's really only won, I think, a domestic cup. I feel bad for him. It is legacy defining. Ultimately, I think it's Cholito Simeone legacy defining. This is one of the greatest managers. They've stuck by him for the longest of times. I actually have.
He's also stuck around too. He's had opportunities where we thought that maybe this was the end, right?
I think he should have been sacked a couple of different occasions. To be honest, it's a refreshing kind of thing. But my point was going to be, real quick, is that I actually think if Atletico somehow pull off the Champions League and win it, Simeone leaves Atletico Madrid. I think it's just time at that point. There's nothing else left to win. He could ride off into the sunset, like you're saying, with Antoine Griezmann, potentially go elsewhere or take a year off or sabbatical. It's absolutely possible because you're at the mountaintop. You have won nothing else. You conquered everything. Maybe come back for another year. I don't see how Simeone would kind of want to come back at that point. There is nothing left. That's the only thing that this man is missing. If he also wins a Champions League at this club on top of all the stuff he's done, it's one of the greatest one-man managing legacies that I've seen. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Arsene Wenger, where you knew he didn't quite have the resources that the Uniteds and Chelsea had when he was at Arsenal, and he was still managing to be competitive and winning trophies and getting deep into tournaments when he probably shouldn't have. That's just how I view it. I think he could. But yeah, final question here. Atletico Arsenal, who makes it to the Champions League final?
I think Atletico Madrid advance and make it to the Champions League final. I think Arsenal have so much energy, their head, and is in that domestic chase for a Premier League trophy. It's going to be very difficult for them to, psychologically manage the weight of both of those at the same time. Never say never, right? To quote Justin Bieber here, that they can get it done. I think, look, they put themselves in a pretty good position for that second leg. You're coming back to the Emirates, barring any sort of slip ups, in the Premier League before that match, as far as injuries or availability of certain players. I mean, they still, when you look at the scoreline, are in a really good position to potentially get a Champions League trophy and a Premier League title in the same year, which I think obviously would
after all the roller coasters of it all, that's still very possible. To your point, like they could stumble in the Carabao Cup or whatever they call it these days, the FA Cup, and then fall behind after losing that head-to-head to Manchester City, come back, City slip up, they win the title.
The biggest trophies available to them. Yeah,
and at the end of the day, it changes everything, the trajectory and outlook of what the club is. Maybe that'll be another final question here for you. Does Arsenal manage to get a Champions League trophy or the Premier League title? Just real quick, yes or no?
No. And I think it's going to have more
0 for 2?
conversations. Yeah, I think there's going to be so many conversations surrounding Mikel Arteta. I think that we've already seen a ton around him, even from people that have an interest in Arsenal, people that have been just kind of very pessimistic. And I think that comes with the territory of a team like Arsenal that have come close to winning trophies, but they just come up short. You think you're never going to do it, and you're going to keep doubting until you actually see a trophy. Yeah. I think that ultimately, if they come away empty-handed this season with no trophies, given how strong this team was and what the expectations were coming into the season, I think that Mikel Arteta isn't going to get fired, but people are going to really question whether or not Arsenal can actually get it done and get over the hump and win something significant anytime soon.
Yeah, probably get the sacking. Speaking of winning something significant, Jose Mourinho, rumored to go back to Real Madrid, been doing pretty well in Portugal since leaving Turkey. This manager is someone who is completely antiquated when we talk about tactics. This is someone who has not evolved whatsoever within the modern game. In cups, I think it still can carry weight because it's always a one-off elimination for the most part, or unless it's two legs. I think you can carry that out. You can play that style. But sustainability over a 38-match season, I don't agree with that. Florentino Perez, for me, is at the downside of his tenure as Real Madrid president. Because, brother, you are out of ideas if you were going back to Jose Mourinho in 2026 for Real Madrid. Xabi Alonso had you guys playing great. You wanted to get rid of him. Sacked, right? Because you were favoring the players. And Real Madrid is always about winning and the players. I understand why it's Carlo Ancelotti was so successful there, was because he was able to manage them, be very pragmatic. Same one for Zidane. I'm not really sure at this moment in time Jose Mourinho is that. He is still someone who doesn't handle the media well. I know some people will find it funny and like this and that. Stop. It's not sustainable anymore. It's okay when he lashes out and you're winning Champions League and you're one of the best defensive sides in Premier League history, a treble at Inter. I get all that. We've seen him at Roma. We've seen him in Turkey. We've seen him now back in Portugal. This guy is not a good enough manager at this point in time for this. Yes, he's going to be given insane amounts of talent. How is he going to be able to handle that? Will he clash heads with these players that have been clashing with multiple managers at this point in time? Can he handle that? I say no. The hiring of Jose Mourinho to Real Madrid would be incredibly stupid by them and just takes them back a couple of years. I don't think it's a serious hire. I don't think it's the proper one. And Florentino Perez is just simply out of ideas. And this might be his last ditch shot as president. And he's been one of the greatest ever, if not the greatest. You just cannot operate like this, where Mourinho is your number one option. So should Jose Mourinho go back to Real Madrid, if you're Florentino Perez, would you hire him, Matt?
Well, it's the way you frame that question is interesting, because if you're Jose Mourinho, yes, you go back to Real Madrid, right?
Of
you had
course,
success there. You coached the marquee players, Cristiano Ronaldo. We know all the household names, right? So, yeah, obviously, if Real Madrid come calling, you're going to pick up the phone and you're probably going to consider that move, right? Absolutely. I think in the case of Florentino Perez, the fact that you're going to a second tenure of Jose Mourinho at the club, knowing what he's been in recent years as a manager, to your point, the inability to adapt to modern times and to rebrand himself as a more modern type of manager, I think it maybe speaks to desperation, right? They're maybe looking for a personality, right? We're looking for someone that can maybe manage the egos, keep a changing room together, because that's been a huge problem for Real Madrid and why Xabi Alonso, left and wasn't able to manage all these big egos and personalities. So right. I think that it's definitely going to be fascinating to watch. I think, again, speaking in similar ilk of the PSG Bayern game, as a neutral, I would love this because it's box office, right? There's always going to be something in the media. There's always going to be something in the post and pre game pressers regarding, there's always quotables with him, right? So he's an entertainer. Always. And I love entertainers in this sport. I think we always are trying to sort
Be
of
very robotic.
very robotic, very formulaic, very vanilla with replies. And then, because of, the way things are now, I like managers like Jose Mourinho because they're very expressive. They'll tell it like it is. They're entertaining. And frankly, look, I know recent years will show us that he hasn't been as successful, but you mentioned Roma. Have Roma been anything better since he left? Have they actually figured it out? Are they
I
still
don't think that's a reflection of
manager they
him.
have?
I think it just
No, I
shows
know
that
that,
they're,
but I'm saying,
yeah,
like,
that they're
the circumstances are always different. People will look at managers and look at players and say, oh, it's not going to work there because of XYZ. Sometimes players and coaches with certain situations are just a fit. And that's the way I view this. I'm not saying it would work out with Jose Mourinho in a second term at Real Madrid, because second terms for managers as historic as his first tenure was, don't always pan out, as we know.
even though Real Madrid is kind of funny, it has worked out multiple times. Because Zidane did well,
Yeah,
and then
but I'm
Ancelotti
saying,
did
like,
very well. I
generally
know
speaking,
what you're saying. I think
yeah,
they're the unique situation to it.
yeah.
Would
I
I be
think the
overly
biggest
surprised? Oh, go ahead.
questions to ask, obviously, is when you bring back a Jose Mourinho, right? A manager typically of that caliber, of that profile and status, is going to want some sort of autonomy when it comes to decision making. Okay, well, if I'm coming back, what pull am I going to have? What market influence am I going to have with certain players that we have and that we could potentially bring in? So those things are always very interesting to see. The power dynamic at Real Madrid with a hypothetical return of Jose Mourinho is going to be fascinating to watch for sure.
I think it's such a stupid move because you have the Endrick, Schoolairs, Nico Paz's of the world.
Yeah.
This guy is not going to know what to do with them. He just doesn't. He doesn't get it. I'm not saying, and this is also like kind of like the problem with Real Madrid. They want a win every single year instead of actually trying to build something a little bit more sustainable and requiring a bit of patience. I understand there's a higher standard there, but you tiptoe on the line of being a clown show where Barca has lost Messi and all these other great players and have financial restrictions, and yet at the same time are better consistently in multiple competitions. The only saving grace for Real Madrid since Cristiano Ronaldo left was like maybe one league title and those Champions Leagues. It like those Champions League carry them over the top. If you look at everything domestically, especially since the Messi era started, Real Madrid have been underperforming relative to the talent. They are way too inconsistent in the league. I don't think Mourinho can figure that out. There are also players within this team that tactically aren't the greatest of fits next to each other. That's why there's been a lot of friction and things have been changing up, right? Because of how Mbappe and Vinny are. They can play next to each other, but the right side, I have question marks. I have question marks on that midfield. Kamavinga, he's likely on his way out. Chouameni, does he stay? I don't know about all this. It is a huge question mark. I think if this doesn't work out or this backfires or whatever, Florentino Perez is like, I think he's in his final days in the twilight at Real Madrid. I think there's huge changes coming there. Honestly, it just from the top level on down. But the good news is they have a ton of talent, so they'll be okay. Final topic of the day, Matt, and this one is an interesting one. It sparked true debate. Rafael tweeting about true football, real football. We have people that are like, oh my God, 5-4 was incredible. A ton of fun. Loved it. High scoring, quality football. And then there's the people who are like, 0-0s are a lot of fun. I enjoyed Milan Juventus a lot more than I did PSG Bayern. Or, if you want to go to the Atletico Arsenal route, I think there are different ways to kind of look at it, right, Matt? And I always try and draw parallels from baseball. And I know you would love this one. 0-0 sometimes is a pitcher's duel. And a pitcher's duel is a great matchup if you love to value great pitchers, right? And you respect the craft. Very much like 0-0s in football can just be about, hey, this person and structure is built up, so it's hard to penetrate this defense. And with that, every single little opportunity that has a chance of going in the goal is going to be weighed that much heavier. So like, oh, that's just that one chance with Salamakers or Jonathan David on the counterattack in Milan Juve. That gives you like great excitement and you're like on the edge of your seat the entire time. Whereas you got the 5-4. Is it a great defensive matchup? No, definitely not. Like I think it's 9 goals. Could have been more. But at the same time, you're like, look at the quality of Olise, Kvaratskhelia, Dembele, Harry Kane, all these players. That's the pinnacle of it. That's the entertainment. At the end of the day, you have to be wooed by these things. I would say as a neutral, I'd rather watch a 5-4. But if
Sure.
he gave me a 0-0 of like what I saw with Milan Juve over the weekend, I still wouldn't hate it. What would you rather watch? A 5-4 match or a 0-0?
It feels a bit blasphemous to lean in the direction of a 5-4 over the 0-0 as a Serie A fan, a Milan fan, a calcio enjoyer, right? Because that sort of has been the Italian identity, the way of doing things, right? Well, they've always leaned on their defensive prowess and the tactical, strategy within a match, a 90-minute match to win, and to win trophies, right? And it's been embedded in the DNA of Italians. But I think that, the 5-4 and the 0-0, it's difficult to judge those in a vacuum because, look, as Milan fans, we've watched so many low-scoring or no-scoring games this entire season. We would love a 5-4 game where we're wowed, we're entertained by the prospects of goals and offensive firepower. But I think that when you look at a match like this, the 5-4 match between PSG and Bayern, it feels like it's basketball. It feels like modern day basketball NBA where it's 3-point shooting. It's this star versus their star. He's going to come up, crossover. He's going to hit a three from half court, right? That's what it felt like watching this game, which I think both have their place in the sport. But I think, again, it's not something that you want to be on the losing side of a 5-4 game because what does it do? As a team like Bayern Munich, man, we spilled in 4 goals. I know with PSG and great attackers are going to get the better of great defenders on their day and vice versa. But the fact that we can't hold at least a little bit a team like this to limit the damage and mitigate the damage and pressure, I don't know. It makes you wonder, are these teams equipped enough to play up against a team like Atletico Madrid that, hey, will sit with their structure. They will sit with their defense and play to their identity and strength. I think in a match like this, a 5-4 game only occurs when both teams, it's like a dance routine, right? When you're giving and taking, right? If you want to play that game, we'll play that game. And I think that's kind of what they both came to the pitch with to do. The second leg, I just don't see it being that high scoring. I think that you're going to see some adjustments on both ends. And I think it's going to be a little bit more of a chess match and a little bit lower scoring. Although I do think there's going to be, goals coming in here.
I rather, as a neutral, watch 5-4. Just because it's just goals. It's just entertaining. Not seeing the ball go in the back of the net is kind of like a lull. It's not to say though that the match can't be great. Of course, there's tons of great 0-0s that we've seen, right? Like theoretically, like Bayern and PSG could have been like a 2-1 if guys missed their chances, right? It's really all about conversions at the end of the day, and the scoreline doesn't always reflect that. So I think that's kind of like an interesting twist to it, is because yes, on paper, 0-0 in theory is more boring than the 5-4, but I think there's arguments, not the Milan Juve 0-0, but other instances of low scoring matches that provide incredible entertainment because it could also be about stakes and what is going on in that. We see it all the time in knockout football. 5-4, again, to your point too. If I'm a supporter of Bayern, I effing hate it. Like I'm seeing my team concede 5. I see and know tons of Barca fans who are sick of Hansi Flick and this suicidal high line. So I think it comes down to the neutral. At the end of the day, I would probably take a competitive 0-0 over the 5-4. The 5-4, just because of the fact that it's so crappy defensively that the stakes, in a way, don't feel the same because there's just so much goal scoring, so much volume that it's just sort of like, are they even kind of trying? It's NBA-esque, the modern NBA. But I would also just like to say to people, sometimes the quality of players are just so great and you can have high scoring matchups, and that just happens. And I think this was one of them because they're sensational. No one is going to sit here and say like neither team can like be good defensively. Like they both have talent. So I'd rather go with that. So Matt,
real quick
go ahead.
Real quick too. I think depending on who you ask this question, you'll get a bunch of different answers based on the generation, because across the board in every single sport, what does everybody want to see? They want to see offense, right? All the rule changes we've seen in major US sports, right, have all favored and have kind of went with the direction of how do we create more offense, more entertainment, because we know that that's what brings people
Right.
to the venues, to the stadiums, to the arenas, and to watch, right? So I think that, again, the 2000s, 2010s Serie A, and Italy enjoyer in me is thinking, man, I love when a team can just get behind, defend, and they can stymie and mitigate a generational offensive team. But then on the other side, you can look at it and say, hey, what are we here for? Are we here to be entertained? Because that's what most people want, right? They want to be entertained when they watch this sport. So I think as long as these two teams, or this in general, doesn't get saturated, like we don't see 5-4 games across the board, which, again, to your point earlier when we were talking about Atletico Arsenal as well, in off the back of this, it was refreshing to see, two the completely different matches when it comes to the tactical 90 minutes. So I think that really ultimately depends on who you ask this question, whether they like the 5-4 or the 0-0.
Yes, the beauty of football is all about taste at the end of the day, and there's many different flavors within this sport. That's what makes it so unique and the most popular in the world. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and watching us. You can follow Matt everywhere at Matt_Santangela, at Matt_Santa22 on Instagram. You can follow me at Martino Pooch, Pooch on Twitter, and then Martino Puccio everywhere else on social media. Again, we appreciate all the support. Please like, subscribe, and comment on the video and potential topics or guests that we should have on next. Other than that, take care, guys.